Welcome to the Branded Impact Podcast. On this show, we go beyond surface level branding, honest conversations with industry leaders, behind the scenes of aligned brand building, and actionable insights to help you elevate your presence. I'm your host, Jo Espejo, aka Jo. Hit subscribe and join me each week for the Branded Impact Podcast. Hello, welcome back. In this episode of the Branded Impact Podcast, I am sitting down with Kannyn January-Courter, founder and CEO of Ambiance, to talk about the real work behind building a meaningful, profitable brand, especially when the journey includes setbacks, pivots, and hard seasons. And I don't know about you, but I know that so many of us have encountered those. So Kannyn, thank you so much for joining me today. I
Thank
am
you.
so excited to learn more about you. So if you can start, talk to me about why you founded Ambiance and what is it and what do you do?
Ambiance is a women's upscale retail clothing store. We have two brick-and-mortar locations and an online location. And I actually worked there in college while I got my biochemistry degree and then took out an SBA loan at 23 to purchase the business from the previous owner. It's very, very bold.
What made you decide to pivot from biochemistry?
Yeah, I wanted to buy the business. I had grandiose dreams of turning it into something even more than it was, which we have now, but I had no idea what I was doing at that time. And sell it and pay for med school. And God had a very different plan for my life because I met my husband and I had my son, and I had to figure out how to make retail work so that I could help support my family.
Very cool. And yeah, sometimes best laid intentions. And then God's like, hey, funny, I had a different plan for you. It's like being open and willing to pivot
Right.
because sometimes our plans, like we didn't really realize what that can mean. And our young selves don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, there's a really good saying. I love the saying. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
I think that one's a good one. Or I like to say that God likes to think I'm stronger than I am because, they say like God won't give you something that you can't
More than you.
handle.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, really? I think you think I'm stronger than I am. Like we're being tested. If your now self could go back to your younger self, is there something that stands out as far as you wish you would have done sooner or maybe avoided altogether?
I probably would have sought out support sooner. I worked with a retail analyst, I think a year after I bought the business. What I have learned over the 21 years of doing this was from other people, right? Talking to and asking questions of people who it doesn't have to be the same type of industry, but have built successful businesses because there is a formula. I also would have taken some leadership courses because I had no idea how to lead a team or manage people. So I would have invested in that a lot sooner.
That's an interesting take. I don't think I've heard leadership come up as often, but I do hear a common theme is that a lot of us wish we would have reached out for mentorship or taken that approach sooner. And I think there's plenty of people out there, and that's really the foundation too of this podcast in a lot of ways is that we want to give back and we want to help people shorten that learning curve so that you
Right.
can get there faster. And it's not a negative thing. We get an education so that somebody can teach us something that we don't know. But then I find that a lot of people get into entrepreneurship and then feel like they have to do it alone. Like they just got to figure it out.
And I think that as we make mistakes, which we will inevitably do, we can often carry a little shame around that. And so it's hard to go to people who you perceive as doing a lot better than you and say, hey, I did this and it didn't turn out well. And what would you do? And how would you pivot? People tend to be very generous of spirit, especially people who have owned their own business, because like any of us, at some point there was failure, there was struggle. And so they can often relate, even if in this moment in their life, they're finding a lot of success. Yeah. And I think leadership, even more so than management, and they're different in the way that they show up in your business, is incredibly important.
So when you say leadership versus management, what does that look like and what does that mean to you?
Well, management is mechanical. Leadership is emotional. Leadership will determine the culture in your business. It will determine um, how you show others how to show up. It's not the day-to-day work as much as it's investment in the business. All of us want our employees to be invested. All of us want um, our employees to bring ideas. That will happen through leadership development within you and your team.
Did you find that the effects of it were additional motivation. Just that streamlines into the management piece too, though, doesn't it? Because that's how
Right.
you deal with situations differently.
Well, in you're investing in your people when you're doing different types of training. I'm implementing something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, in my business, and you end up having a leadership team that you're meeting with on a regular cadence. And some people have been in leadership positions for a long time, but really haven't had the opportunity to know what that means. I think a lot of us default to whatever we learned growing up in terms of how we show up for people or how we communicate our expectations, how we respond to difficult situations. Oftentimes, they're not really what the business needs or what your team needs. So you're having to learn and adopt new tools. So you're lifting everybody up with you. Where I think that oftentimes the word leadership and management get intertwined. You can manage behaviors, but you really can't manage people. You have to lead them. And I'll give you an example. For me, it used to be that I would want to hire people and I'd want to hang on to them. Like my whole hope was that I'm going to hire you and I'm going to train you and I want to keep you here. People would leave, I feel so upset and I take it so personally. And as I've grown as a leader, I realized that's to think that we're in control is, again, it's laughable, right? My goal is to bring people in, build them up so that wherever they go, whatever they do in the next chapter of their life, people are blown away. Where did you work? What did you do? Because they have skills and they can show up in a way that impacts that next business, that next path that they're going to be on.
I like that mindset shift, and it is hard. I want to shift the conversation a little bit now because this is something that I think so many entrepreneurs struggle with is letting go. So developing people and then having the confidence that you can do more with others' help. So you have 2 brick and mortar locations and an online store. So when you bought the business, did it have multiple locations?
I had up to 4 locations. More is not always more.
Okay, more is not always more, but I want to start with when you made the decision to grow, because having 2 brick and mortar locations, it's impossible to be in 2 places at once. So how did you do that with the branding? How did you do that with the people? Because there's a lot of times we have a hard time scaling and expanding because we're afraid that no one is going to do it as well as we do, or is it going to follow through the service the same way? Or I know a lot of times when it's not necessarily a retail store, but it's a service provider, they're like, people are coming to me and expecting to see me, not somebody else. So how did you overcome some of those obstacles when you decided to open another one and then eventually 4 locations?
Well, I cloned myself, so it made it really easy for me to be in both locations at the same time. Through trial and error, I think that I've had all those thoughts or experienced, you know, situations that would reinforce those ideas, but if you train your team correctly, it is like you're there, right? If you create a culture where here are my expectations around how we deal with a customer issue, how we give service, how we maintain the cleanliness of the business, then it is like you're there. I have my operations director and I work a lot and she's amazing. And, I said to her recently, we can't work any harder to grow. The growth will come from the people that we lift up around us. Their competency is really what's going to enable us to grow. Again, it's a mindset shift and letting go. I had someone tell me that they made the most money they ever did in business when they started giving pieces of their business away. So I know that there's like a surrender or a letting go that really frees up your time. In my business, I'm considered the visionary. In order to have great ideas, you have to have the mental capacity to do it. And if you're working in the business, it's really hard to do that. You have to work a certain amount on the business. It's like an 80-20, right? And then if you're the visionary, you have to come up with ideas in order to stay relevant. I'm in retail. Retail is, I feel like as time goes on, things kind of are speeding up in terms of the expectations from your clients and having to, market correctly. And just when you think you figured it out, the algorithm changes.
I hear you talking about when you did the locations, it's the system, it's the culture. Is that how you feel it was with the branding too? Because I think it's so important that people, when they walk into one location, they have the same feeling and experience. So what did you do to ensure that your branding was intact? And then it sounds like a big piece of it was training people? Because you talk about the customer service, the cleanliness of the building, and all those pieces. But what were the key focus points? Did both locations have the same look, feel, touch, or did they have two different vibes when you decided to
They
do that?
they have slightly different vibes because they're both kind of a reflection of the town that they're in. I've rebranded several times. I'm actually in a process of rebranding right now. And it's that idea that like the business has matured and grown up as I've matured and grown up. And I don't know if you read that book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. As you're starting out in business, there's certain things you have to learn to get to a certain point, but then you can't keep doing that to get to that next point. You have to, sometimes when you're starting off, you don't have as much money, right? You're not investing, you're bootstrapping a lot of this, especially when it comes to to branding and packaging, and you're more focused on cost than the customer experience. So as you grow, you have more of an opportunity to look at, the customer journey and how each time they connect with your brand, what does that feel like? I think branding is very important, and not just and for today, which is different than when I opened the business or bought the business. Now you have to look at your social media branding. Like, how many social media platforms are you going to be on? And then you have paid advertising, emails. There are so many places. So having a cohesive brand is really important.
It sounds like you have to struggle in retail and the fact that you have a cohesive brand and you want to give that feel, but then you're also battling the fact that the buildings look different. And then there's only so many things that you can control. But I
Right.
still think ultimately it can be done. Now, you mentioned, I think we want now, I'm like, you keep telling me good points. I'm like, okay, I got to remember to go back to, because earlier you said more is not always more.
Yes.
So talk to me about that, because you said you went from 1 to 4 and now you're back down to 2 brick and mortar.
Yes.
So what were some of the lessons that you learned that made you scale back down?
Well, COVID was a hard lesson for all of us. I think that, especially when I was younger, like I was so ambitious and I felt like I had to grow a specific way to grow. In my mind, it was continuing to add other stores. Managing, I mean, I have such respect for retailers who have stores in different cities and different states. I think my furthest store was like 5 hours from me. If there's an issue, you got to hop in the car, drop everything and drive 5 hours to help figure out what's going on. I mean, you would ideally would like a team that could support that, but hiring in the two cities I opened was incredibly challenging. Hiring is a challenge, I think, for most businesses today, more so than it was, a couple of years ago. Especially pre-COVID. But again, you have to have time to come up with creative ideas to make sure that your structure and your training and all of that is really organized and set up and then being executed. I think that until you have that down, to continue to grow is going to create a lot of chaos and a lot of stress, and not necessarily make you more profitable or make you more money. I mean, we were doing more in sales, but there were so many more moving pieces that I was kind of drowning in the work.
I think the just trying to figure out what that balance looks like, and the systems are key. Everything that Kannyn is talking about with the branding, she has yet to mention logo and she has yet to mention color and any of those pieces. Her focus has all been on team, culture, and experience. And that's what carries through the branding. And then the other piece that I wanted to kind of revisit was, you mentioned that your brand has evolved. And I think this is a piece that a lot of people forget that is an option, because what we started with when we were doing it ourselves, we were bootstrapping, or what we envisioned for our brand or our life, it's okay that it pivots. So then what has gotten you said you're rebranding again. What are some of the things that you're revisiting in this rebrand?
Things that I hadn't even considered or thought about at 23. I mean, at 23, I bought a brand, an established brand. I wanted a single mark for a logo so that we could use it because we are manufacturing our own goods. I wanted it to really reflect how we've grown. Now, I consider ourselves, a luxury brand. So I wanted the brand to reflect that. I wanted something that was timeless. I could send you, I think I have probably 6 or 7 logos in the 21 years that I've owned this business. And some of them were super fun, but they don't age well. I mean, I'm really excited about our new brand. It actually breaks down into design that we can print on our tissue paper. We're going to make garment bags. Like we're doing a lot more than we've ever done. And I wanted a logo that would enable us to do that and look look elevated.
That's awesome. And I think that's a piece too. We get to do that as we grow and we get to build. So you start somewhere and you bought an existing brand. So there's a lot of those decisions already made for you, but then you've pivoted and you've changed. And if you didn't catch it, she said that she's got at least 6 or 7 variations. I don't even know what variation of a logo I'm on myself. And I even changed my business name. I've changed my demographic. I've changed my target. It's just been, and for me, it's been an evolution of leaning into what really brings me joy and what serves for this season of my life. So it's a little different because I'm not in retail, I'm a service provider. But when I first got into photography, I was doing weddings and it was fun and I loved it. And I love capturing special moments, but then I was gone every Saturday and Sunday. And then as my son got into sports age, I was like, wow, I don't want to be missing sports games. And then I started blocking my calendar and I'm like, well, that doesn't really work for a business model. And in Florida, we have wedding season pretty much all year round. So I was like, well, that's not going to really work. So then I made that pivot and shifted out of weddings. And then as I started and I finally went full time, branding kind of fell in my lap. And I love the fact that I could marry like my business experience from everything I had done growing up and gone to college for with the creative side. But selfishly, it also allowed me to create space for being the type of mom I wanted to be. And I no longer had to worry about scheduling brand photo sessions during golden hour, which is the best time for family photos, but also happens to be the time that my children had to be shoveled in 2 different places at the same time. And so I'm like, how do I coordinate dropping off 2 children and getting to a photo session and back? And if anybody knows Florida, most popular time of year to get photos is also heavy rain season. So then I was having to reschedule and cancel and it was a whole fun thing, but then I pivoted again. I remember my first iteration of a logo I thought was absolutely gorgeous, loved it on the computer. I walked into a networking event that I had sponsored and I knew it was my logo from across the room, but I was like, for the love, you can't read it. Like it's too fancy in script and it didn't work. I was like, that's great. So then I had to go back and revisit it again because it didn't work. So as you guys are envisioning your brand, I think one of the things I would love to encourage is just get started and then don't be afraid to pivot and look at it and take into consideration things like, is this timeless or is it trendy? Are you going to outgrow it? And then if you do, that's okay. Then just
And
make that pivot and
you
shift.
will outgrow it. Your taste will change and your business will change and your logo will need to change. Even like YSL and Gucci and all those big brands, like they change their logos. They'll all move one direction and then decide they don't like that anymore and move another direction. Free People, it's a brand that I used to carry years ago. They changed their brand every couple of years. And within the brand, they had like different logos.
Yes. From a branding perspective, I also say be mindful because it's a lot. It's a very big expense. And then you've got brand recognition. I also like to encourage trying something for a little while and seeing if it fits. But at the end of the day, most of us are not shopping because of a logo. We do not return just because of
It's
a
the
logo.
experience, the connection. Well, and not everyone's going to like your logo. You need to like it. I mean, we just rebranded and, some designer was, you know, didn't like it. But I was like, I don't care. It's not for you. It's for me.
I was like, we're not here to serve everyone. So
No.
you have to love it because you have to have, this is what lights me up the most about working with brands and rebranding is when they get excited about their brand and they feel connected to their branding. And that gives them the confidence and the courage and the desire to get out there and share it. Because the worst thing that you can have, and this is what I see happen so many times, which is really when people start to pivot and they want to rebrand, they'll say something like, here's my business card, but like, excuse the whatever, or, oh, that photo is awful, or it just doesn't feel disconnected. And if you're finding yourself not wanting to get out there and share your branding, or you don't want to create the marketing materials, one, it could just be you're not creative and that's not your strong suit, which is fine. But usually what I find is that there's a disconnect. And so you're looking at your branding and you no longer feel connected to this. I've grown up. I've outgrown this. I want to be excited about my branding. I want it to match the vision that I have. And then that's given you the excitement to be like, I'm going to print this on a garment bag. I'm going to do the tissue paper. I'm going to elevate my experience. And what does that look like? And that's the beauty of evolving and growing. Your brand continues to get to that next level, and that's okay. You just have to be mindful of how often you're doing it.
It is very
Yeah.
expensive. And I would say also be mindful of what you're going to use it for. I can't remember the type of brand I was looking for, but it's kind of like how Disney, you can break it down so it's just the D, right? So you can use it in so many different formats and it's still recognizable as Disney, right?
Yes.
And so I wanted something like that because I know I had so many different things that I needed to use it for.
I also want to recommend that if you are going to do a rebrand, you have to stop using the old stuff. So you have to be ready to commit to fully changing over because then it causes confusion. But that's where it can get expensive or just time consuming. And I don't think we realize how many things have our branding until you do a rebrand. And then you find it everywhere.
Yes.
You're like, oh my gosh, like it is in all of the things. And then you have to commit to changing it.
Well, especially online. You don't realize how many platforms they have either captured your brand or are using a logo just from being in business.
One, I just came across one the other day and I changed my branding 3 years ago. And I just stumbled across a directory that still had my old stuff. And I'm like, oh my goodness, where did this come from? How did I miss it? And this is, again, sometimes you talk to the adage though, where like those of us that do, it's like what the cobbler's kids don't have shoes because they're too busy helping everybody else. With the running the brand agency, my branding usually takes backseat to all of my clients that I need to take care of first. So the bandwidth. I think the biggest takeaways that I'm taking from are you have to be willing to invest in the people. And you said that earlier. The people that invest and have teams help them grow are the ones that go further. Because if we try to keep it all ourselves, we're going to bottleneck our business. So you've got 2 brick and mortar locations, you've got an online business, you're expanding and you're growing, but you also have a team that you're investing in that's giving you the space to be the visionary, that's giving you the space to dream and execute at that level that no one else can do. And you've got an operations person, then it sounds like that's handling, I'm sure, a lot of day-to-day logistics and making sure that the widgets are spinning the way they should be. And then you've got teams running your stores because you can't be a visionary and running a store from open to close.
And being able to manufacture clothing and design and manufacture fine jewelry, I wouldn't have the time to do that. And then I also do, business consulting. I love doing that. I fell in love with retail because I love being of service to people. I love helping people. So this is kind of that next iteration for me in my life, being able to help other business owners. As retailers, most of their money is tied up in their inventory on their floor. So there is a formula to how much inventory you should be bringing in by department, but I've made a lot of mistakes. So I'm able to help them in a lot of ways in their business because I've been there.
So, Kannyn, if they've been listening and they want to learn more about your luxury retail brand or are interested because they have a retail store and want to learn more about your inventory formula and how to manage that, where can they find you?
They can shop our website. It's www.shopambiance.com, or they can reach out to me. Leadership First Consulting is my business. LinkedIn would probably be the best way to find me and connect with me if they had questions, or they could reach out to the store and they put me in touch with them.
And so, last piece of advice for anyone that is in this journey of entrepreneurship, and I guess what's the number one thing that you wish you would have implemented sooner with branding?
With branding, that's a hard one. I mean, what I would say is that anything worth doing in life is hard. Being a business owner of any kind is hard, but it's worth doing, and that you have to persevere to find success. It's on the other side of the failures or mistakes that you're inevitably going to make.
It's a strong piece of advice. When you look back, that one piece of branding, is there anything that you've done that you feel like really had an impact on your business?
The branding is so important, but it's the execution of the branding that is more important. It's really being able to tell your story through your brand that matters more than the brand itself. There's a brand in my industry, and when they launched, they were called Show Me Your Muumuu. It's a women's clothing brand. And they made these like 70s muumuus. That's what they did. There were these 2 girls in New York. It's a huge brand now. They got investors, and it was a horrible name from my perspective. And now it's just called Muumuu. And it never deterred them from their growth, right? But they had to evolve and change it as they grew. I think you shouldn't be so critical, because branding is a creative thing, and there's going to be people that like it and people that don't like it. Trust yourself. Pursue what you love.
I think the key there is so important because a lot of us focus on getting a logo, getting a website, getting the colors. You spend all this time designing and creating and feeling aligned. There's a second piece to that.
You got to execute.
You have to execute. You have to implement, because your logo could be beautiful and your website could be gorgeous, but if no one finds it, then what does it matter? And then if there's a misalignment. So I think it's so key to have branding that tells your story and that aligns and that feels connected to who you are, because then that's going to follow through on the experience. If you're creating a brand that misaligns, you're going to have a hard time growing your business and you're going to have a hard time getting behind it because there's a disconnect. So thank you for sharing. I think that is instrumental, so important, guys, because I have so many clients that have gotten beautiful brand foundational visuals and then they didn't take that next step. They didn't implement, they didn't execute. And that is the key. And then being willing to fail and fail forward. And that's it, guys. It is honestly a long journey. And then I think the last piece that she talked about earlier that I don't want you to forget is look for the mentorship. Look for the people who are willing to pour back in to help you along the way so that maybe you can avoid some of those bumps and bruises that they've figured out and can help you avoid so that your journey can be smoother. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. Doesn't mean you're not going to have any failures of your own. Just hopefully you can shorten the learning curve and get there faster.
Progress, not perfection.
Progress, not perfection. I just said this the other day, and I think that was what was taken away from a different podcast I was a guest on. I said done is better than perfect. That's my variation of progress, not perfection. And so that seems to be a very unifying stream. And then I say you done is better than perfect, and then you elevate and you grow, and that's okay. So you can do better. Your 23-year-old self could only afford so much and could only do so much. And now you're at a different place and you're able to do more. And that's the beauty of a journey. And that is the beauty of a brand evolving. So thank you again, Kannyn, so much for your time. And if anyone has been listening and they know of someone that would benefit, please share and give us some love and like and subscribe so other people out there can learn about branding and the impact that it's making in business. And as always, continue to go out there and make your branded impact. That's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Branded Impact Podcast. If today's episode sparked something in you, please take a second to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend who's ready to unlock their rebrand era. And if you're ready for a brand that's rooted in authenticity and built for impact, one that truly reflects your story, your energy, and your evolution, let's connect. Head to brandingbyjo.com or DM me on Instagram at brandingbyjo. Thanks for hanging out. Now get out there, show up with purpose, and make your branded impact. I'll see you next week.